Hello, good evening, and welcome back to the Bundesliga show. Hope everyone is doing well this evening. We are back for a talking point show tonight. So just myself and Mark, we've got ourselves a topic to go through, which we've already shown you guys on Twitter for the record. Obviously, before we get into that, first and foremost, Mark, how are you doing this evening? Do you have a good weekend of watching the Bundesliga?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, obviously we did our watch along on Friday night, which was a good start to the action this weekend, and some brilliant games again. It's been a great start to the season, as it always is. Really, a lot of shocks as well. I think I had a couple of decent tips as well. I think I tipped Frankfurt to beat Leipzig, which I'll take that one, and also I think we both tipped Hertha to beat Augsburg, didn't we? Which turned out to be quite a decent tip. And what was the other one I had? Yeah, there was another one, but I can't remember off the top of my head. So yeah, but I got a couple of decent tips right, and yeah, it was a generally good weekend of football.
Yeah, it was. I think we literally got quite unlucky with our watch along, didn't we? As we thought it was probably going to be the best one of the weekend, or one of the better ones of the weekend. Is probably the least entertaining, ironically. But just to let you guys know, a bit of admin before we get into tonight's show. First and foremost, of course, we're in partnership with Bundesliga Boxes. The best and the go-to company for genuine, authentic German football t-shirts. Get yourself over and find them on Twitter, on their website, to get yourself one of the batches right now, and hopefully there's a shirt still in your size. They go like hotcakes, so make sure you get over there soon as you possibly can. Please do like this video if you enjoy the topic that we're about to get into. It'd be really interesting to see how tonight's show goes. Comment along, be really interesting to see people's thoughts and opinions on the two teams that we're covering. And of course, please do press the red button and subscribe to the channel. And one other reminder just before we do start is that we're doing another watch along on Wednesday. And we're doing a watch along for Inter Milan versus Bayern Munich. So the opening group game of the Champions League should be an absolute belter. So yeah, really important game for both, with Barcelona in their group as well. Bit of a group of death. So yeah, make sure you join us on Wednesday night for that one. But yeah, without further delay, into tonight's show. We are going to be covering, or our talking point is going to be focused on why are SC Freiburg and Union Berlin thriving so much so far this season in the Bundesliga and kind of in general. So we'll probably just take it team by team and kind of, have a little bit of a chat in general about each one. So obviously, if you're a supporter of either team and you kind of stumbled across this, please do comment along live, or if you see the subs afterwards, put your thoughts in the comments below as to why things are going really well for you at the moment. Whether it's the players, the manager, the ethos, the setup, everything else in between. Be really interesting to hear people's thoughts on them. So, right then, Mark, shall we? We'll start with the Bundesliga leaders right now, shall we? Obviously in the shape of SC Freiburg, and we'll kind of maybe go at it from a few different kind of angles. So maybe looking at their season so far, the manager, the history of the club, and kind of like the ethos as well. So, I mean, what this season has kind of, impressed you and has kind of stood out with regards to Freiburg?
Yeah, obviously the first point with Freiburg that you've always got to remember is that man Christian Streich. And the manager, since he's actually been at the club, I was doing a little bit of research for prior. He's actually been at the club without a break since 1995. Incredible. Yeah. Man, obviously he coached the under-19s, the under-21s, under-23s, before eventually becoming head coach in 2011. So he is the longest serving coach in the Bundesliga by quite a distance, actually, which obviously the Bundesliga is a league that likes to fire coaches quite willy-nilly, really, doesn't it? Which is quite not really that in keeping with the German culture in many ways, which tends to prefer solidity and continuity. But yeah, obviously in the Bundesliga, usually managers come and go, but not at Freiburg. And for me, I am a big fan of long-serving managers, and I think not only the fact that Freiburg have stuck with him, because he has had one relegation during that time as well, but, he has managed a 5th place, a 6th place, obviously taken to the first ever cup final last season. And it's just an absolutely brilliant record. But I think it's also the faith that Christian Streich has shown to Freiburg as well. It works both ways, because I think there's absolutely no doubt about the fact that he could have got a better job, a better paid job, that's for sure. He could have at least got a shot at one of the big 4, big 6 German clubs, Maybe not quite Bayern Munich or Dortmund, but definitely the likes of Gladbach and teams like that. And I just think he's a local guy as well, which is absolutely massive. He's from Freiburg, basically. He speaks with the famous dialect of Freiburg from the Black Forest. And he's also a very, very vocal man, which kind of like, it's like a match made in heaven, basically. Like, the culture of Freiburg, the where they've come from, and Christian Streich is just the perfect match. And I think that's absolutely massive, in my opinion. And I think the second point we've got to mention about Freiburg is that youth academy as well. They've got one of the best youth academies in Germany, and we can see that just looking at the side now. And I think they've got a fantastic blend of youth players, the likes of Christian Günther, one of the best fullbacks in the Bundesliga. He's played his whole career at Freiburg. He's been capped by Germany, and yet he's still always stayed faithful to his hometown club, which is just massive. And it just proves the feeling that they've got at that club under Streich. I think also the fact that Matthias Ginter, has actually rejoined the club. He's another Freiburg local, started his career at Freiburg between 2012 to 2014 before moving on to, well, you would have said bigger and better things, but he's actually come back to Freiburg at the relatively tender age of 28. So for me, that shows everything about that club. Players want to come and play for them. They want to play for the hometown team. And there's a whole host of other players, the likes of Höfler, Hurler. They're all local guys, which is just incredible, really. And then obviously that combined with that really, really nice blend with some flair players from abroad, the likes of Grifo, who, let's be honest, is probably one of the best players in the Bundesliga nowadays. And also the likes of Ritsu Doan. It's just absolutely fantastic. Obviously, they did sell Schlotterbeck, who was another local guy, actually. They sold him to Dortmund, but they did well to kind of replace him with Ginter. And just the way that it's a mixture for me of the manager, the youth setup, the fact that signings are tailor-made for the club. They don't just sign whoever's available for a cheap price. They sign players that know what the club means, they're passionate about the aims of the club, and the players that fit the system as well, which is really important, let's be honest.
Yeah, completely agree. And it's kind of staying on the manager, I guess. Obviously, he's had over 400 games whilst being in charge of Freiburg, and he's won 157 of them. So he averages 1.43 points per game in the Bundesliga, or obviously in general for Freiburg. And as you mentioned, they kept the faith with him with regards to going down and then coming straight back up. Obviously, the formation that he prefers to play is kind of the 4-4-2, like double six. So having the 2 defensive midfielders in place, although he has kind of tweaked that every so often. So I guess the way that they play helps to prevent counterattacks and shields on kind of like a lower block sort of system to make sure that they have a numerical advantage when teams are kind of building up around them. And that kind of like reflects so far this season, doesn't it, Mark? So obviously they've won 4 out of their 5 games so far, scoring 10 and only conceding 5 in those. So averaging 2 goals a game and only conceding 1. 3 of those came in that Dortmund game, where obviously that's their only loss so far of the season. They were 1-0 up and in, cruise control as well, up until the point where Flecken obviously made the real mistake in Howler to change the game on its head, and then a couple of bits of uncharacteristic defending allowed Dortmund to run away with that and win 3-1. But other than that one blemish, so far they've been absolutely spot on in the league. A couple of things that stand out so far this season in general for Freiburg. So they've had the second most shots so far in the league, obviously just behind Bayern Munich, as well as being second for most efforts hitting the woodwork. So they are not only are they a team that defend really well, they're obviously a team that are now starting to kind of add that kind of element of attacking play, I think, to their game. Again, a team that kind of doesn't overly rely on possession, and again, kind of like that need to have successful passes. Again, they're quite low on statistics on that, indicating that they're a club or a team under Streich that are comfortable out of possession, defend well as a team, And again, kind of like they cover great ground. I think they're third in the Bundesliga for distance covered, nearly 600 kilometers covered as a team so far across 5 games. Obviously, that's really good numbers. As well as another interesting stat that they're in the bottom 3 of the division for duels won, but when it changes to aerial duels, they're in the top 3. Only behind Union Berlin and Bochum. So there are some really interesting numbers so far behind Freiburg, and it obviously indicates clearly to the way that they've been playing under Strike so far. And obviously their kind of aerial dominance, the way that they defend, how dangerous they are at set pieces as well. So yeah, some really interesting numbers so far this season from Freiburg. What all those kind of things stands out to you, Mark, as to how well they've been playing as a team, I guess, and that kind of, as you mentioned, that ethic and ethos of signing players that only that are fit for purpose, so they're ready to go into that team if they are new players, and obviously with the the youth academy set up as well.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I always think Freiburg are based on like a mixture of like really, really solid defending and obviously a lot of pace as well. Like so Salai, they break down the sides. But I also think as soon as you talk about like the way that Freiburg play, if you watch the game on Saturday, pretty much all of the goals came from set pieces as well. Set pieces have always been an absolutely massive part of Freiburg's game. They're absolute menaces off corners. They have Grifo, who is just, for me, is the best set piece taker in the Bundesliga, no question. And I include corners and free kicks in that. The guy's an absolute machine, literally, with the dead ball. He's also a good player in open play too, but with the dead ball, he's just absolutely second to none for me in the Bundesliga. He's just outstanding completely. And I think his corners, if you watch the game the other day, they got absolutely outplayed in the first half against Leverkusen. I was thinking, wow, they weren't very good in that half. And literally 5 minutes into the second half, they were 2-1 up against a potential top 4 rival. And it's just, it's that kind of mentality, that Strike puts into him. And a lot of that comes from Strike. There's no question about that. Like he only accepts the best. He literally only accepts the best. And, the signings that they've made, the likes of Grigoric, tailor-made for a team like Freiburg. You saw in the game on Saturday, he turned it around, he got the goal, he got an assist, and he's just perfect. That number 9, that big battering ram number 9, who can also put the ball in the back of the net, is perfect for a team like Freiburg, who kind of thrive off set plays. I mean, as you said, they're not the best team in possession. They're never going to be the kind of side that are getting 60, 70% possession. That's not their skill, Their skill is, they always will be a little bit of a counter-attacking side. You kind of prioritize set plays and, that delivery from Grifo, like to Grigoric getting on the ball. But also they do have quality too, like Doan and Salai are 2 very tidy footballers. I mean, you've got to remember they've done all this season without Schade as well. And he's like probably their biggest, the most highly rated name in their entire squad. I know that Brentford have supposedly bid about 20, 25 million quid for him, and Freiburg refused to let him go, So they've just got and he's another one that came through the youth as well. We didn't mention him in the players that came through the youth. And it's just fantastic the way that they build and just, I just think they could really get top 4 this season for me. That's how much I rate them. And it's just, great start to the season for them. And it's going to be interesting to see how they continue to move on.
Yeah, we'll maybe look ahead to how far they could maybe go this season, then in general, taking the club forward in a sec. I just want to return to that kind of ethos thing that you picked up on a little bit earlier. And I'm putting another name into the hat that obviously is synonymous with the club. I'll probably butcher the pronunciation, so you'll have to correct me here, Mark. But obviously the club's kind of CEO, Jochen Sayer, who's also been with Freiburg for over 2 decades.
Yeah.
And again, it's that kind of relationship that they have, Strike and Sayer, is one that's also been really key. He's always, when he's kind of been interviewed and with regards to kind of building Freiburg from where they have come from in terms of, being a Zweite Bundesliga team for a good while. I think they went through a period of being in the second division for 4 successive seasons in the early 2000s. Obviously not going back that far at the moment, but, and Sayer has always said that we're a club that looks at the bigger picture, and not one that is just kind of primarily looking from game to game to game. Obviously, you did mention that you do need to win the odd game of football, of course, to keep yourself afloat. But again, as we've touched on, when they got relegated, they kept the faith with Strike. There was no kind of panic button being pressed, and then obviously as a result, they came back up as a result. So that's really interesting kind of look at, and it's quite refreshing as well, I think. So that's one of the kind of the real thing that provides that stability. And apparently Sire and Strike are quite opposites, which again, is quite a good thing. You don't want two people that are so kind of aligned that they agree with everything that they do. So there's no challenging each other, because obviously when you challenge each other in a good way, it challenges people to be better or things like that. So I find all that really interesting. The philosophy, as you mentioned, Mark, is really clear. The concentration on the academy is always at the forefront of their minds. Hence why I think either last season or this season, 12 of the 26-man squad came through the academy. Sire's a really big part of that, meets with the staff a lot, kind of with the younger players and the staff that are in charge of them. So, yeah, they're clearly a club on the up. The move to the new stadium as well is quite an interesting one, isn't it, Mark? Because I think there was a lot of chat about, really including everyone in that process, such as, even connecting with the ultras. Like, I think I read even like all the food and drink outlets that they used at their old stadium basically came across with them as well. So there was no kind of like cutting everything up and just starting with a new glitzy, stadium that had no history. They've literally brought everything with them. So I think, that just demonstrates how clear they are with their ethos and how well a run club they are.
Yeah. They're so old school, really. It's fantastic to see. I remember when we had the Freiburg fan on, I think about a year ago, didn't we? And he also kind of alluded to that, just how traditional they are. I think I was also reading up some really interesting stuff about Strike. Apparently, like outside of the Freiburg games, he has no interest in football whatsoever outside of the Freiburg games. He doesn't, like, all of his friends are non-football related, and he just like hangs out in the pub and talks about like politics and travel from what I read. Like, he's got very little to no interest. He doesn't watch games like a lot of managers do. He's not watching Champions League and stuff like that. He's just chilling. When he's not working, he treats it like a kind of job, But obviously he does a very, very good job at that. And I think in Germany you can meet these super, super old school guys, and he's one of them. Literally, like, I've met people here in Germany who don't even have a smartphone. They carry like Nokia 2210s around. And to be honest, I wouldn't be surprised if Christian Streich is one of those guys, because he is old school. And another thing is, he's kind of a bit of a hero within Germany as well. He's one of those managers that's very popular amongst the German fans in general, because he's always talking about politics, and he's like a working class guy, and he's always like seen as a man of the working class, and he's against all, you know what I mean? He doesn't like football being on TV all the time and things like that. He's very, very hardcore, and he's like a Puritan, do you know what I mean? Like, he wants football to be like what it was in 1826 or whatever, but he does this, but he obviously does manage to modernize football, and his team is doing really well, so he's definitely, he knows how to navigate the modern game as well. But what a fantastic guy he is. He's just a great guy, I think. I like to, obviously, because I learn German as well, I like to watch his interviews and just see what he says. And he's a right character. I guess you could compare him maybe to someone like a Tony Pulis in England, really. He's like that kind of guy, but a little bit more positive than Tony Pulis was. But they're similar kind of guys, really, really old school, but real characters. And the game needs those kind of guys. But Freiburg are lucky to have him, and I don't see him leaving anytime soon, that's for sure.
Yeah, let's hope so. So before we move on to Union Berlin, because obviously we want to talk plenty about them as well, let's just maybe quickly answer, what the future might hold for Freiburg. The immediate future, they're playing on Thursday. Good luck to them playing against Karabakh. Hopefully they get off to a really good start in the Europa League. I guess it's just going to be that kind of that desire to keep on being a top, top 7 club in the Bundesliga for seasons to come, get that level of consistency going. I think one thing that Sire mentioned particularly was that they don't need to sell their best players anymore. Obviously, I know that Schlotterbeck moved on in the summer because Dortmund presented a really good offer for them. But I don't think there's that need to keep on having to sell their best 2 players every single season. Then recruit really well again and stuff like that. So that's that's one thing I think they need to look to the future and keep on doing. Being able to balance always being in Europe perhaps will be the next challenge for them. They've got the stadium for it. That kind of next level of income, I guess, that will come with it, and maybe creating that extra squad depth on a consistent basis. Keep on using the youth players. Do you think the future is even brighter, Freiburg, Mark, in the next 5 to 10 years going forwards?
Yeah, definitely at the moment, because for me, this is probably, and I think a lot of experts as well also agree, I think this is probably Freiburg's best side they've possibly ever had for a long, long time, maybe in the history, basically. That's how good we're talking. And again, like they've got real quality players there. It's not like they've just got a lot of workhorses who just kind of scrape results, They've got like guys like Grifo who could play for me for probably, apart from Bayern, I think play for any team in the Bundesliga. There's no question. They've got the likes of Ginter, who is just he's a regular German international playing for Freiburg. It's just incredible, really. Flecken, who's getting a pick for the Dutch team. It's just, they're a very, very good football team with good players. And for me, in some ways, they'll almost be a little bit bitter about the fact they're in the Europa League, because I really do think they could get Champions League football if it wasn't for Europa League. I really do. I think they're that good. And obviously with Leverkusen and the last couple of games, Gladbach's drop in form, I think, they could realistically get in that top 4. They really could. But I think in reality, they've got to enjoy this European run, because they have had European runs before, but this is the first one in a good while. And I think they've got to enjoy it. They've got to try and get through the knockout into the knockouts and, just see where they can go, because the other thing is the crowds they're getting is just absolutely fantastic. Like, they've sold out pretty much every single game since they moved to the Europa Park Stadium. And, this is a small club at the end of the day. It's not a big club. They're getting 35 to 40,000 every single game. And it's just it's a brilliant time for the club. And I don't see it stopping anytime soon, certainly not within the next 2-3 years. And if Strike, continues his desire and the board continue to back him, along with Sire as well, obviously the director of football, then I don't see why they can't continue this kind of golden generation of Freiburg, really.
Yeah, absolutely. Great stuff. So yeah, fingers crossed for Freiburg on Thursday night. So moving on to obviously the other club that we're focusing on this evening. Let's have a good bit of chat about Union Berlin, leading from the front in terms of those teams from Berlin at the moment. A real kind of hotbed of talent that you can really get from the capital city is something that I think we really need to see in Germany, is that kind of Berlin club really thriving. Currently inside the top 4, are ever improving since they've been in the Bundesliga, and obviously in their kind of recent times, obviously since their promotion after beating Stuttgart in that playoff match, only one of 3 teams to ever achieve that as well. So obviously one thing just to kind of notch up straight away there. First of all, then, kind of the season to date so far, Mark, one of 3 unbeaten teams in the division after five games. Again, similar to Freiburg, impressive kind of haul of goals, tight at the back, going forward really well. We've played RB and Bayern already and unbeaten in those 2 games. I've got the Bundesliga joint top goal scorer in Geraldo Becker. We could go into all sorts here in terms of impressive stats. So what's really stood out for you in terms of how they've started the season?
Yeah, again, just absolutely brilliant work in the transfer market, first of all. I think both me and you, Rory, we were gutted really when Awoniyi joined Nottingham Forest. Yeah. I think neither of us could really understand it. Obviously, money is the big talk about it. Union is a club really on the up, whereas Forest were always going to struggle this year, let's be honest. But 50 million quid, in the bank, they were happy with that. They signed him for 5 the year before. Again, very good business from a financial perspective. But then you think, who's going to replace him? And so far it's actually been a guy that was already on the books, that man Geraldo Becker, incredibly. And what he came really to the fore at the back end of last season, and he's been even better this season. I always thought this was a guy that had a lot of potential, and oh boy, does he look, he could get 20 goals this season. He looks that good so far, and he's flying in confidence. Obviously, Sibachu, I still don't know how we're going to call this guy over the season, but the new signing from the American international, new signing from Young Boys Bern, has done a pretty good job of plugging the gap for Awoniyi as well. I think he's only got one goal, but he looks a presence in the side, and he's going to be a solid player. He might not get the same number of goals as Awoniyi, but I still think he's a solid signing replacement. But just in general, you know, they're a side that they don't have as much money as a Freiburg, for example. Freiburg do have a little bit more money in the coffers than Union, but what they do very well is they work the free transfer market absolutely brilliantly. And this is not the first season they've done this. They've been doing this ever since they got into the Bundesliga, which is now only the fourth season, incredibly. But it feels like they've been there for years, doesn't it, the way they progress.
Yeah.
But like even a guy like Haberer, who they actually signed from Freiburg, ironically, like he's slotted into that team and replaced Prömel brilliantly. They actually lost Grisha Prömel on a free to Hoffenheim, who was one of their key midfielders, and it's just absolutely brilliant in terms of how they select players that are going to fit into the ethos of the club. They're going to fit in with the system, and they just seem to know which players they need to sign. And some of these players are not the most glamorous players on paper by any means, but like they're bringing in players and they all seem to do a job. Like their record of making good signings is just outstanding. It really is. And they do this year on year on year. And last year they sold the likes of, they sold so many players last year as well, you've got to remember, you know. And they just, every year they manage to replace the best players. And it's just, again, one man that we've not mentioned so far, but it's got to be mentioned, Urs Fischer. I mean, we talked about Streich. He's from a similar kind of notebook, really, to Streich, you know, but obviously he is a Swiss. A lot of people think he's German. He's actually a Swiss national, and Union Berlin is actually his first job in Germany, incredibly, as well, which a lot of people forget. And it's been pretty much like a fantasy, really, for him since he joined the Bundesliga. Well, he actually joined when Union were in this fighter Bundesliga. To be honest, back then they were a side that were seen as just like a mid to lower team in this fighter. You know, nobody really thought they'd never been in the Bundesliga since. Obviously, a team that were initially from East Germany, so they never played in the Bundesliga system prior to 1991. They'd never been in it since they were introduced into the West German system, so to speak. Then all of a sudden, within a year of Urs Fischer, they were already in the Bundesliga via a playoff win over your boy Stuttgart, Rory, ironically. And I remember when this happened in Germany, and nobody could believe it. Union Berlin in the Bundesliga, people were like, God, they'll be lucky to win 2 games, you know. And then literally that first season, I remember they started really, really badly. And everyone was like, oh, they're down, basically. And then all of a sudden in the second half of the season, they won like 10, maybe not 10, but they won like 8-9 games out of the 17 in the Rückrunde, and that saved them. And from then on, they've just gone from glory to glory. And it's just, you know, Urs Fischer is a big part of that. And again, he's an old school manager. It's an old school club in many ways, you know. And it's just a great story again.
Yeah, it'd be nice to talk about their ethos and kind of go into that a little bit more in a second. But more on Urs Fischer. So he's a manager who likes to primarily play kind of that three at the back, so maybe a 3-4-1-2. Certainly in recent times, I guess. And as you said, Mark, he's been at the club since 2018 after doing a lot of good jobs and good work in Switzerland, obviously in his native country with FC Thun, FC Basel. I think there's another one as well. I can't quite realize. Zurich, that's the one. And had successful spells at Basel in particular. And then obviously, over he came to Germany. And as you mentioned, the change, the swap over has been really succinct and, done a really good job in terms of acclimatizing. Out of his 166 matches to date, they've won 71 of them. So averaging 1.58 points per match and averaging 1.5 goals, only conceding 1.28. So again, all the stats really do add up to, how well they've been operating firstly at the Zweite level, but now obviously at the Bundesliga ever since, and kind of looking maybe at the way that they play a little bit. So far in the division, they're the second top goal scorers. Obviously this season, and they're only 13th on shots attempted. So just showing how clinical they actually are in front of goal. They're again similar to Freiburg. It's really interesting that Union are the worst in the Bundesliga for successful passing percentage, with 72.6%. And have the joint worst possession stats alongside Schalke with 41%. But then on the flip side, they win the second most amount of duels, showing their aggression, obviously their physicality as a team. The top of the charts for fouls. But interestingly enough, they're also bottom of the cards. Charts. So again, it just goes to show that they're a smart team. They make fouls, they're tactical in the right areas, but they're physical and aggressive, but they do it in the right way. They win the most aerial duels in the Bundesliga. Again, very similar kind of the ways that you're looking at how well Freiburg defend set pieces. Again, the same with Union. They defend those sort of crosses from open play, set pieces really well, and they're so dangerous from them as well, whether they're scoring directly from them or scoring from second and third phases after that. And then obviously we've talked about how you've got Geraldo Becker and Petre now, whether they want to play fast on the counter or in general get behind teams, they can do that really easily as well. And that's something that's been, really, really good from the club so far. So, I mean, I guess that kind of all adds up to you, Mark, in terms of how well they played this season, kind of the method of which they go about securing wins and defending as tightly as a team, because again they cover a great amount of ground as a team as well.
Yeah, I mean, even if you look at the side that they played the other day, I was just looking at the starting lineup. I mean, obviously they played Bayern Munich, and a lot of people thought Bayern would roll them over and end that, whereas now actually a 12-match unbeaten run in the Bundesliga overall. But if you look at the team that Urs Fischer went with, he went with like what I would call a kicking team. Like a team that is going to commit a lot of fouls, a lot of kind of tactical fouls. The likes of Khedira in there, obviously Remy Khedira, not Sammy, signed from Augsburg on a free transfer last season. He comes in for these kind of games. He's not a great footballer, but he's a good tactical player, and it's just the likes of Thorsby as well, who was their big summer signing, brought in for €5 million from Sampdoria. He can also, get stuck in, so to speak. Also, the fact that he played Kevin Behrens as well, who doesn't actually start that many games, but he's like a proper battering ram up top, and it worked because Bayern Munich, in that tight little ground in the Stadion in der Alte Forsterei, which is a famous stadium in Germany, really, for being like a proper atmosphere in there. Everyone is standing, just like this incredible old school attitude. And, Union knew that they didn't want to lose this game, and they went out with the side that ensured they didn't lose the game. As you say, 25% possession they had in that game, incredibly. Only 25% as a home team. But, Urs Fischer knew he wanted to get a team that wasn't going to lose the game. They wanted to keep that unbeaten record, and he did it, and he shook up Bayern, and Bayern didn't create many chances. And, they are a side that can score goals, as we saw the week before. They stuck 6 past Schalke. So they are a side that can play on the day. But, the likes of Haraguchi, one of their better footballers was left on the bench for that game. Sven Michel, who actually scored 2 goals the week before, was also benched. He was probably a bit gutted, but that's what Union Berlin's all about. It's about the team ethic, the team ethos, and the whole club for them, even more than the likes of Freiburg. This is one of the least, capitalist football clubs you're ever going to come across. They're like, they don't even have proper sponsoring in the ground and things like that. I was told that they don't even have a proper halftime entertainment. It's just all about the fans. And they even have some fantastic traditions, like at Christmas, they all gather together and sing like Christmas songs and stuff like that. Like, you just don't see that in modern football, really, do you? But that's Union Berlin, basically. And it's like another incredible statistic with them that I love is just the amount that their membership has grown as well. And they've now got 42,500 members in the club. For those of you that don't know, like German clubs, obviously with the 50+1 rule, it means that like 49% of the club is owned, 51% of the club is owned by the fans. And basically, if you want a say in the club, you have to buy a membership, where it's like you pay about 10, 20 euros a month. And basically, you have a right to vote on all the big club issues and stuff like that. They have 42,500, which is roughly the same as Hertha Berlin, the city rivals. And 5 years ago, that was unthinkable, pretty much. You know, and a lot of people told me that. I know that live in Berlin told me that, you know, in a few years, Union will be the big club in Berlin. There's no question. But they've already said that they have no plans on moving out of the Stadion in the Alte Forsterei. And they're going to stay with that 22,000 ground, even though they could probably fill a ground 30, 35, even 40,000 nowadays. But that's just part of the charm of this club.
Yeah, good stuff. So let's quickly look at like where they've come from, I guess, really, Union, and you know how again the ethos really fits in, as you've already talked about, Mark. And certainly one thing, regarding the players, is that Union Berlin usually recruit these players from the free market, as you've already said, from lower leagues, and they just made them better players. A lot of them are just Zweite Bundesliga players that have just come up to this level and just are performing well above what they probably should be. So it really is impressive how well, as you mentioned, they do that as a team. But yeah, it wasn't obviously always as plain sailing. Like in the 1990s and early 2000s, the club really did struggle financially. As you mentioned, Marcus, they're not a club that's always been overly affluent. They almost collapsed a good few times until, right at the end, getting the right sponsors in at the right time. And kind of things like that. Eventually, they were part of the inaugural Three Liga. And they were the champions in that first year in 2008-9. And that's not too long ago. They were even in the 5th division. So their rise really is tremendous. But they stabilized in the Zweite, obviously of the 2nd division of Germany, and then obviously got that famous promotion ahead of Stuttgart. But there's a couple of things that really do kind of stand out. As I mentioned, like the group of players aren't superstars. They're a collective, with a sprinkle of kind of additions here and there. That's what has made them such a dangerous team to work with. And again, kind of the ultra and the fans' involvement in the club as well, Mark. And again, going back to another name, club president and lifelong fan of the club, Dirk Zingler, has done great things for them. For one thing, for example, that stands out, he famously froze season ticket prices after they got promoted to the Bundesliga. Just things like that, just showing what a close knit group or kind of community they are. And obviously they've done such brilliant things, coming inside the top 6, coming 5th last season, creating history as time goes on, and just loads of other things really do spring to mind. The kind of the fans as well. The bleed for Union campaign is something that stands out to me as well. So back in 2004, the club again were in financial trouble, but all the fans grouped together to donate their own blood at local hospitals to raise money for the club. So it's literally bleeding for the shirt. I mean, with that kind of support behind you, how can you not have a club that's going to thrive and is going to improve? They made necessary updates to the stadium. I think in the 2000s as well, with help from fans. 2,000 fans worked themselves to modernize the stadium to make sure it was up to date. So, I mean, all those things that I'm just reading off there, Mark, it's no wonder why Union are such a special club and how they're going up and up and up, and hopefully there's no ceiling on how high they can go.
Yeah, I think that's the key point. They are a special, unique club. It's as simple as that, and the fact that they have got so high in the football pyramid now, as you say, the record of 5th place last year, and they're now going to be representing Germany in the Europa League. Obviously, last year they're in the Conference League, but this is a step up even,
Yeah.
And it's one of the great stories in football, and I think that's why I was happy to do this show, because not only both of these clubs are like really kind of like flying the flag for the smaller clubs, you know, and they show that these clubs that don't have big budgets and, you know, they're not from big, like kind of histories and stuff like that, they can achieve, you know, really highly. And it's just, it's fantastic. And as you say, going forward, I mean, what can Union do? I mean, I wouldn't say their ceiling is quite as high as Freiburg, because I think, as you say, I like that point that you made before, that they are largely fighter players that have just worked so hard to improve, basically.
Yeah.
And I think their squad isn't as good on paper as Freiburg's, in my opinion. But as you say, they overcome that by just working so hard, and just everything comes together. But I still believe that they've got a couple more seasons in Europe ahead of them, for sure. I think, you know, they could get, probably not Champions League, that might be a step too far for them, whereas I do believe that Freiburg can genuinely get in the Champions League. But I would say for Union, they just got to enjoy the ride, you know, and I'm sure the fans are, like, judging by the atmosphere at every home game and the fact that, you know, every single home game is sold out, no question. Like, you know, obviously the fans are enjoying themselves. But I just think, you know, the key for them is probably keeping Fischer. I'm not sure if they lose Fischer, it might be a little bit tough to replace him with someone as good. You know, that continuity. I would say the same for Freiburg. Or if they lost Strike, they might lose a lot of momentum, you know. But I would say, yeah, keep the manager and just keep doing what they're doing and keep enjoying themselves, basically. But I don't see a relegation anytime soon, that's for sure. I think, you know, if they can keep maintaining themselves as a Bundesliga club for as long as possible, then they're going to become, like, financially a Bundesliga club as well.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely agreed. So really enjoyable to kind of talk about both of those clubs for a little while and look at a bit of their background and history. I know a lot of our our fan base and our viewers often talk about how they enjoy the history of all the clubs, and we've not kind of gone into too great a depth, but we're kind of giving you that background and as to why both of these teams, you know, have had their foundations, you know, built and how well they are doing. If you want to read a little bit more as well about Union Berlin, there's an article that I wrote on them to a similar extent, basically, which is on the Over the Bar website. If you just go onto the Bundesliga section, if you want a bit of bedtime reading, go across and check that out and much more. But I think that's a nice place for us to finish tonight's show then, Mark. And just a reminder that for everyone to make sure that you tune in on Wednesday for our next watch along, Inter Milan versus Bayern Munich. What could be better on a Wednesday night?
Yeah, absolutely. And if you did enjoy what you saw today, check out at Over the Bar FB and at Over the Bar Extra, and also OTBfootball.net. As Rory said, he did write an article on Union Berlin and also some other related Bundesliga stuff too. So check that out. Also, we have articles on many things football related too. And yeah, don't forget to check out the FLS show, which is, I think it's Thursday this week. But yeah, make sure you subscribe so that you can get the notification on that as well, because they've been changing it quite a bit this season. So yeah, make sure you're watching that too. And yeah, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe if you enjoyed what you saw. So yeah, thanks a lot again. And yeah, as you say, it's not long until you get your next dose of Bundesliga show action, which is going to be Wednesday evening for our next watch along. So see you then, guys.
Cheers all.